An American trucker, a man who was at the heart of a dissident Republican group that posed the biggest threat to Northern Ireland's fragile peace.
Please step away from the window!
A real IRA insider who was working for its enemy.
My name is David Rupert. I was a MI5 FBI agent. I was embedded inside the real IRA as a spy, and I have a story to tell.
Falcarra, County Donegal. A run-down stately home, an unlikely location for a meeting of senior Irish Republican Army figures. But what happened here in late 1997 changed the course of Northern Ireland's peace process. The IRA was beginning to give up its war, but a group that viewed that as treacherous walked out of the meeting. The split gave rise to a dangerous faction, dissident Republicans who would continue the war against the British. Their leader was this man, Michael McKevitt. He soon set up another group that had no intention of disarming. It became known as the Real IRA. And began a bombing campaign against the peace process. In 1999, Michael McKevitt brought David Rupert into his secret army to help him fund his terror.
McKevitt wanted to meet me, and because I was carrying the money over.
McKevitt opened the door, and unknown to him, his enemy walked in.
MI5 is just like walking on air, because they got somebody embedded now inside the real IRA.
David Rupert's long road to becoming a spy began thousands of miles away in America, where he was working in the trucking business.
Oh, I always loved trucks. I just love trucks. I got into that business and did very well at it. Problem with it is I'm really horrible at business. I always did back pocket accounting, and you know, if I had money in my back pocket, I was well off, and if I didn't, well, I wasn't.
In 1992, a girlfriend made a suggestion.
She said, let's go to Ireland. And I just loved it. It was just like home. We came back and we broke up, and I thought, well, okay, I'll just go back and, you know, let's look around more.
Rupert's travels reminded him of his childhood in rural upstate New York.
My father always told me to wear orange on St. Patrick's Day, and I never understood why. He would have been Eastern Ontario loyalist. My history teacher in high school, her name was Edith Finnegan. She was all Irish, red hair and temper, and she got my attention. And I just loved history.
In 1992, he began to be schooled in Irish Republican lore. A new girlfriend made a life-changing introduction to this man, Joe O'Neill, a hardline Irish Republican who split from the Provisional IRA in 1986 over Sinn Féin's decision to enter the Irish Parliament. He wanted war to trump politics.
England has been 800 years in my country. It's a war situation, and that's it.
In his family's pub in Bundoran, County Donegal, O'Neill regaled the American tourist with stories.
It was an IRA pub. Pictures of the Queen with crosshair rifles, on her and all this stuff. And, he sang rebel songs on the weekend. I liked him, and he was very big on Irish history.
Commemoration parade, the 16th anniversary of the hunger strike.
O'Neill was being monitored by Irish police, the Gardaí. They wanted to find out who was his new friend, a 6'7" tall American.
We were in Sligo, and I saw the Garda taking pictures. And I said, "Hey, Joe, they're getting your picture." I didn't know they were getting my picture.
It didn't take long for a photograph to go halfway around the world and end up in the city of Chicago. It's also where David Rupert met Maureen Brennan.
We were a real fast romance and living together and got married shortly after. He swept me off my feet, took me off to Ireland a couple weeks after I'd known him.
Their romance coincided with the Irish peace process. At the same time, the Garda photograph landed in Chicago. The Garda query about the American seen in the company of a well-known Republican eventually led to this building, the then headquarters of the FBI here in Chicago. In July '94, David Rupert got a visit from the law.
The woman who worked for me came in one day. She says, "The FBI's out there to see you." I think, sweet Jesus, I wouldn't have ever done anything really illegal, but gray area was my specialty. This guy by the name of Ed Buckley, who was Chicago's anti-Irish squad, he comes in and he's kind of gruff and like they're gonna bowl me over. It's like, "Hey, listen, I've been down a lot of roads, And he throws these pictures down on the desk, and I looked at him, I says, "Oh, that's me and Joe." I says, "He's a friend of mine." "Well, you know what he does?" I said, "Well, I know he's involved with the IRA somehow, but I said, doesn't make him a bad person to me." So then he decided, "Well, would you come to work for us?" I said, "No, man." I said, "I don't need to get on the bad side of a foreign terrorist organization." As soon as he left, I went and called Joe O'Neill. I said, "Hey, listen, the FBI was here to see me about you just in case you're interested." And Joe says, "Yeah." He says, "Just don't worry about it, or don't, it'll all come to nothing."
However, the first IRA ceasefire would transform the life of the American trucker. With US President Bill Clinton heavily invested in the Irish peace process, the White House needed to know from their own spies on the ground if breakaway Republicans like Joe O'Neill would fill the vacuum. The FBI needed to get David Rupert on side.
The first time the FBI came in, they had nothing to offer, and then they came back. And they said, "Well, we'll pay for your trips." Well, David's like, because he's coin operated. Coin operated means like, "I'll do it if you pay me." Like that. That's what coin operated means, And the trips are not cheap. It's like, "Well, I don't know anything. It wouldn't harm anybody. I could tell them what, and yeah, that'd be a great plan."
The couple travelled back and forth to Ireland for a year, with David Rupert passing information to the FBI until he hatched a plan to go all in. Tullahan, North County Leitrim. The FBI gave the couple the cash to lease a pub here in the summer of '96.
I thought, what a good adventure. And running a pub in Ireland, I thought that would be great.
Oh, it was awful. I had owned bars and thought I had seen some pretty good drunks, and I had seen nothing like that.
The pub comes with a caravan park as well.
Oh, yes. It was just horrible. They were all either former or current IRA prisoners. Of course, they let them out on license.
What was its value to the FBI?
Well, the value was it allowed me to become ingrained in the IRA population and to become accepted.
As part of a couple, Rupert also had the perfect foil.
Maureen gave me legitimacy. You know, who's going to go there as a agent of whichever government and with their wife in tow?
The IRA's weapons were not silent for long, which put the peace process in perilous danger. And to make matters worse, what the Irish, British and US governments feared would happen, did happen.
After almost 2 years without explosions, the bomber returned to Northern Ireland at 10 past midnight.
Joe O'Neill's group, the Continuity IRA, began to carry out attacks. In his Bundoran pub, O'Neill became much more guarded.
You would be talking along until it came, say, to the word bomb. And instead of saying the word bomb, and which made sense, you know, it'd be just like like that type of gesture to indicate a bomb. And again, the same deal with shooting was that, you know, it'd be like that type of thing. And they'd make the gesture and then it would continue on. I come to decide that he was wrong. It was wrong to kill people. Joe told me that killing would be a sin, was it not, for the sake of Ireland? And I just couldn't understand that. I think that was the beginning of, we're friends, but he's wrong on this. The up the raw mentality was, offensive.
The couple stopped running the pub, but the FBI's investment in David Rupert was about to pay off. In early '97, O'Neill gave him a shopping list of bomb-making items to source in the US. It included Semtex.
He said you can put the Semtex inside teddy bears. He gave me an accommodation address in Ballyshannon to send him to, which was a school. None of that stuff ever happened. But anyway, I gave that information to the FBI, and it breathed a whole new, level of interest into the investigation.
Rupert was now trusted by the Continuity IRA. By then, he had also become invaluable as the bagman for their US fundraising effort, aligned to a political group led by Rory O'Brady. And then came another critical moment.
A new IRA ceasefire is in force, but there's a question mark over peace talks. The ceasefire began at noon.
With the provisional IRA on a second ceasefire, the danger posed by breakaway Republicans was even greater. The FBI had a well-placed spy inside the Continuity IRA. MI5 then made their move.
And I met their handler, and he says, so if we ask you to, say, do a hit on Rory O'Brady, and how would you feel? So, I says, how much did you have in mind? Money, which was a joke, because I wouldn't kill anybody for anything unless it was in defense. And no, he says, we wouldn't ask you that, we're just curious.
What did you agree with MI5?
Oh, just, I'd do whatever they wanted. You tell me what to do, and okay.
But how much?
Oh, I numbers-wise, I can tell you that when I got done, the last contract, I was getting about $22,000 a month. But that covered my flights, all my expenses. That was it. And the Brits gave me part of it, and the FBI gave me part of it. We used an encryption system. When I sent an email, it went to both, places, both handlers, FBI and MI5.
MI5's advice to Rupert about the dangers of his job was quintessentially British. What was the emergency plan?
My British handlers and I discussed that, and they said that if in fact you think you're exposed, if there's not somebody there that, with a gun to your head type exposure, that just stop and let's assess the situation, see just how bad it is before we do anything.
The couple kept calm and carried on and worked as a team.
I would stay in the car if he went somewhere. And when he came out of the meeting, we would take the drive, and his memory was phenomenal, but I would be taking all the notes down. Then we would get home, and he would send it to his handlers, and then encrypt it, and then we would burn the notes, literally burn the notes.
When you're living with somebody who has to lie to survive, how do you know when they're telling the truth to you?
Because I was in it with him. We were playing the part, and when we were even alone, we were still playing the part because we were so paranoid about the walls hearing.
Then came a seminal moment in the peace process. The Republican movement entered all-party peace talks, a move dissident Republicans viewed as a sellout.
The very fact that the IRA, or the provisional IRA, had, if you like, entered into a peace negotiations meant that they had, in other words, they had abdicated what they had originally set out to do, was the unification of Ireland, full stop.
Michael McKevitt's real IRA, born out of fury, was going to continue the war. In 1998, he wasted no time in showing what the real IRA was capable of.
Police in Northern Ireland are blaming Republican extremists for last night's car bomb attack. The bomb exploded outside a police station in the town of Moira in County Down.
As peace talks intensified, Portadown in County Armagh was next. Then,
God bless all the people of Northern Ireland.
the historic Good Friday Agreement.
The people of Northern Ireland, they don't want to go back to war. They want to settle their problems through democratic means.
But barely 24 hours later, on Easter Saturday, the Continuity IRA was preparing an attack. In Bundoran, Joe O'Neill asked David Rupert to take him for a drive.
I said, where we're going? Letterkenny. Okay, so off we go. So I noticed that every time we met a car, Joe's going like this, covering his beard. And finally I said, Joe, what's with the beard? Well, in case we meet the cops or the Garda or whatever, you know, they wouldn't recognize me. So I said, so what are we doing? He said, well, we're running front car for a device coming up behind us.
Running a scout car in the midst of a fragile peace agreement.
And I assume it's a bomb. So we went to Letterkenny and turned around, made the circle and went back.
In his rented home in Bundoran, the American spy contacted his MI5 and FBI handlers.
I call London, and I had a number to call, and told them what the problem was, and they said, they'd take care of it.
He then warned his handler where the attack might occur, remarkably communicating by email.
When I sent the email about it, I said, listen, we took the thing to Ballybuffet, Letterkenny, and I said that there was a good chance that it would have went on to Oma or on to Derry, because they were the next cities. And just, again, as direction to the FBI.
The British contacted their Irish counterparts. The attack was thwarted after Gardaí set up checkpoints.
So the Garda hit Ballybuffet pretty hard with an operation that night, which disrupted the thing.
The attacks kept coming. And the real IRA stepped up its campaign. Michael McKevitt, the man who'd been in charge of provisional IRA weapons, was now a highly dangerous dissident.
There was a huge degree of concern because obviously you had the kingpin, the man that was in charge of all the supplies. You know, he knew where they were under his control. I think it would be fair to describe him in terms of something akin to what might have emerged in the former Yugoslavia, a warlord. In other words, you controlled your own fiefdom, you had your own soldiers, you had your own equipment, and you were answerable to nobody other than yourself and your own particular agenda.
McKevitt was so elusive, few pictures of him exist, but his ruthlessness made him a major threat to the peace process.
I remember one intelligence analyst telling me there was a certain bomb maker had expressed a reluctance about engaging in some type of operation, and McKevitt had told him, "You will do what you're told for as long as I want you to do it." And that was that. And that was classic Michael McKevitt.
On August 1st, the real IRA bombed Banbridge, County Down. Then came a 2-week lull. The Glenif walking trail in County Sligo. On Saturday, August 15th, David and Maureen headed for the hills.
My wife and I were up climbing the mountain in Glencliff, which is the horseshoe up there. So we climbed up to the towers up there.
At the same time, the town of Omagh in County Tyrone was packed with shoppers and tourists. The red car had a massive bomb in its boot. This photograph was taken just before it exploded. And this was its brutal aftermath. For hours, Maureen and David Rupert were oblivious to the carnage.
We got home and I took a nap and woke up to, the bombing.
Good evening. As many as 12 people are thought to have been killed in a serious bomb attack at Omagh in Northern Ireland at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
I was just, horrified. So I called my people in London. I said, we really like to get out of here. They said, well, you need to see if you can't get Joe to tell you to leave. That would be best for you to leave.
That evening, David Rupert went to see Joe O'Neill. All of the dead in Omagh had yet to be counted, but the music in O'Neill's had not stopped. Rupert later sent these details in an email to his MI5 handler. It's his first time reading his words in 25 years.
Obviously, the Omagh bomb was the height of conversation at the bar tonight. Though I expected there would be a drop in attendance tonight, particularly because of the bar and the type of music, it was more crowded than it would normally be.
His MI5 handler had advised Rupert to wait and be told to get out of town. Joe O'Neill unwittingly obliged.
I think everybody was scared, and I think he was afraid, what was going to happen. And I said, we really would like to go back. I said, what do you think? He agreed it was best for us to get out of the country. And so we did, as quick as we could.
The Omagh bomb claimed the lives of 29 people, including a woman pregnant with twins. For weeks, people across the island feared a return of the near-daily shootings and bombings in Northern Ireland. But in spite of the atrocity, peace largely prevailed. Seen here in the baseball cap, Michael McKevitt's real IRA admitted responsibility for the Omagh bomb.
At 11 o'clock, scores of people stood in silence on the streets of Dundalk to register their disgust at the slaughter in Omagh and their sympathy for its victims.
In Dundalk, his partner Bernadette Sands closed their family's business in the midst of a public backlash. McKevitt declared a short-lived ceasefire. In December 1998, 4 months after the Omagh bomb, the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern sent his special advisor on Northern Ireland, Martin Mansur, to meet Michael McKevitt.
Bertie Ahern authorised me to go, if you like, sent me. Now, he held back from doing it, say, in November and a bit earlier. It was a question of when the timing would be defensible. What was the purpose? The purpose was just a single purpose, which was to get a reply to the demand of the Irish government that they should stop for good. And the reply, sugar-coated though it might have been, was in the negative.
McKevitt was not going to accede to the Irish government's demand to stop the real IRA's armed campaign.
McKevitt, who, in my opinion, was an intelligent and sophisticated person. He wasn't, in the vernacular, sort of stupid. He might have been in a strategic sense, but I think within a few months they had begun to resume. And I mean, in personal terms, that was a very big mistake.
Michael McKevitt was now the biggest threat to the peace process.
How did your MI5 handlers change in the wake of the Omagh bomb in terms of their priorities for you?
They had a big decision to make.
The decision was what to do with the American spy embedded in the Continuity IRA. MI5's decision was made for them by Michael McKevitt, who wanted to meet David Rupert.
McKevitt was trying to recruit him because he was known as a wealthy American.
MI5 now had an opportunity to insert a spy into the heart of the real IRA. David Rupert needed to maintain his facade. He was about to enter a different league of danger. On August 29th, 1999, at this hotel in Monaghan, David Rupert was introduced to Michael McKevitt.
I liked him. I mean, I
What did you like?
Well, he just, I often say you can walk into a room and if there's 10 people standing there, there's one you can pick out as the leader, and he was boss.
Who was he most interested in at that meeting?
Who was he most interested in? Me. I was the money man, I was the bag man that, could bring them money and could do things for them in the U.S.
This is the email that Rupert sent to his MI5 handler that evening.
Big day. If I was worried about it being slow when I got here, it all changed today. We arrived at a little before 6, found as private a table as we could in the lounge. He went on to tell me that they were very well organized. They had all levels of organization laid out in all of Ireland, but they had problems in Belfast. But it was coming along. We talked about the Omagh deal. He said they had been equipping and arming and training Continuity Army's people. He said they had been giving them cars to put the bombs in, and in a couple of cases, even driving the boys to do the jobs. He said Omagh was a joint operation. He said they had both agreed to take the responsibility. He said in actuality, it was 80% Continuity Army. I gathered from what he said that they stole the car, built the bomb, but Continuity Army's people drove it in. I see an entire new playing field now, probably much more dangerous.
And David, that was the day that you met Michael McKevitt for the first time.
Right.
It was game on.
Right.
In a reply, his MI5 handler wrote,
"Well done on producing the goods in the most impressive way."
In the IRA, McKevitt had the cunning to source and hide its arsenal. Out on his own, he trusted an American bringing over bags of dollars.
I always remember someone who was on the Army Council of Real IRA saying to me that he was a man that could see the grass grow. He knew everything that was happening. But terrorist organisations always require new faces and new skills. And Michael McKevitt was very much in the market for people that could do that.
David Rupert wasted no time. He switched his allegiance to the real IRA.
Joe didn't take it well, and what could I say? I'm sorry, Joe, but you know, these people are going somewhere and continuity's not. They haven't done anything, they haven't. And I got up and locked out, and that's the last I saw of him.
Because you were a real IRA man?
Yeah, cleaned out the apartment and went and stayed. After that, I stayed at the Carrickdale.
That's the Carrickdale Hotel where David Rupert mainly stayed during his visits from then on. What's incredible is that his second meeting with Michael McKevitt took place in a location few ever got access to, McKevitt's own home.
And what McKevitt spoke about is not only astonishing, it was being fed back to MI5, including his admission that the real IRA ceasefire was a sham.
He said the way it has always been was the politics ran the military. Now the military will do their job. He said that the ceasefire came about purely as a tactical maneuver to get the heat off them. He said it worked and allowed them to rebuild. He said that President's strategy is their first hit as going to be directed specifically at something like troops or London Center Financial District, to make a big enough splash to overshadow anything that could have happened at Omagh. He said that if you had a chance to buy 150 AKs and 2 RPGs, you would take the RPGs because the AKs were of no use in today's type of campaign.
MI5 were left in no doubt about McKevitt's plans to send his bomb teams to Britain.
He said the old days of car bombs in Northern Ireland was gone. He said they started out that way and it was a mistake. The new way was going to be very targeted and very deadly. He said today the only car bombs that would be authorized would be in downtown London. No suggestion of when, though.
As part of his reply, his MI5 handler wrote,
"Your reporting will be read with great interest at number 10.
The American spy was soon introduced to McKevitt's partner, Bernadette Sands.
She was a tough lady. If I were found out, I would have assumed that she would be as capable as putting a bullet in my head as McKevitt would. You know, I would have not questioned that.
David Rupert was in real danger. Michael McKevitt lived by a code that demanded spies be executed. The roads close to his border fiefdom had long been a dumping ground for the bodies of IRA informers.
At this point, his wife Maureen largely remained in the US.
Were you worried at that time when he returned on his own?
All the time, 24/7. He would be in the phone booth calling me at 2 in the morning because I had to work and our hours were so different. And that probably looked suspicious in itself, so he had to go way out to get to that phone booth.
The stakes were high. At a time when the peace process was continually on a cliff edge over the requirement for the IRA to give up its weapons, McKevitt was the man who knew exactly where its arsenal was buried.
When the provisional IRA went into the peace process, the only one that knew where all the weapons were was McKevitt.
Did he say that to you?
Yeah, specifically. And he said they had to come to me and ask where they were. So You know, I gave them enough to keep them happy.
Michael McKevitt had spent a lifetime being really careful. He had no convictions for any IRA offences, but he wasn't careful enough because it was McKevitt himself who opened up his secret world to the FBI and MI5 spy.
He brought Rupert further into his inner circle.
What a day, I'd say, if I were ever to be nervous since I worked on this project, today was the day.
He emailed this after coming from his first real IRA bomb team meeting in Dundalk.
Mickey let, as I refer to him, guy number one, have the floor first, but it soon turned into a think tank on what they needed and how it could be used. Digital radios, number one. Number two, mercury switches. Number three, parking timers. Number four, bug sweeps. Number five, marine magnets. Number six, voice modulator. Number eight, black powder. Number nine, night vision glasses. They were nice enough to allow me to take notes on the topics since they'd become too extensive for me to keep track.
David, reading that, it does seem incredible that at a real IRA meeting, you were allowed to take notes.
There's only so much you could remember, and that seemed logical. So I asked if I could take notes. What are they going to do, say no?
You were there. Why do you think Michael McKevitt trusted you?
Not a clue. You know, sometimes you click. We clicked. Plus I had been inside Continuity Army, and there had been tales of me giving them stuff, and the tales always wind up bigger than what actually happened. So it wasn't like I just walked off the street. I had already been cleared by Continuity Army. So he was actually stealing me, and this is my prize, and you know, he's gonna do big things for us. And you know, that's what he needed to think.
The real IRA needed software to stop spooks hacking their computers, but they were literally speaking to their enemy.
There used to be an encryption program that was only available in the States, so they wanted to know if I could get them a copy. I said, sure, I'll get your copies. So we went through that and went through talking about the bombs. They told me how they defeated night vision and, you know, all this different stuff.
MI5 was about to strike gold. McKevitt made an extraordinary suggestion to Rupert.
They wanted a U.S. member on the Army Council, like me. And he wanted to know what I thought about it. I said, sounds good to me.
Can you recall your reaction from your MI5 handler when you told them McKevitt suggested that you should be on the real IRA Army Council?
Well, of course, they were elated.
His MI5 handler wrote,
"We should watch to see how this develops."
It was another flashpoint in the peace process. The IRA, who McKevitt saw as sellouts, had agreed to decommission, put their weapons beyond use. McKevitt now more than ever could lay claim to being the leader of the real IRA. And Rupert's MI5 handler let him know the risks involved, referring to Michael McKevitt as MM.
There are real fears that MM will restart his campaign on the back of news that the provisional IRA is decommissioning.
David Rupert returned to the US. Garda authorities had been kept in the dark that MI5 had him in play within the real IRA, but now they were brought in on the operation.
I think there was tensions between An Garda Síochána and MI5 at the time, but you've got to understand that Dave Rupert is just one piece in a much larger jigsaw. I'm pretty sure the guards didn't tell MI5 everything they were doing either. In point of fact, I'd be astonished if they did.
In February 2000, MI5 had a spy about to join the top table of the real IRA. David Rupert was one part of a wide intelligence gathering operation, And those sources, along with years' worth of profiling intelligence about McKevitt, were put to use.
MI5 were wonderful to work with. They used to call me, or I would call them on my way to a meeting with McKevitt, and they would tell me that he's probably going to ask you this or that, and when he does, here's what we want you to tell him. And they were pretty accurate.
The Gardaí's covert surveillance unit were now monitoring Michael McKevitt and David Rupert's meetings. From McKevitt's home, Rupert was driven towards the Cooley Peninsula in County Louth.
Just a horrible experience. It was out to a beach on the north side of Dundalk, and it was just like ink. It was a dark night, and this guy pulled in. Now, I didn't know this guy, and so I get in the truck with him. So I'm trying to think, okay, so now how am I going to know where we're going to go? So I started counting, and I count 1001, 1002, 1003, left turn, right turn, and so on and so forth. So I could find the place on a map the next day.
In a house at the foothills of the Cooley Mountains, Rupert attended his first real IRA Army Council meeting.
It was so funny. I mean, because it's almost like Keystone Cops. They got a pair of white gloves for handling stuff, right? But they've only got one pair, and there's 4 or 5 guys in there. So one's got one, one's got the other one with the idea that that's the only thing they'll touch anything with. But you know, as you get doing things, they're touching one side of something with a white glove and the other side with their hand. And I'm sitting there and watching this, and I'm thinking, it's like I say, it's like a movie. It's like a comedy.
And what were they touching?
Surveillance stuff or debts or, different stuff like that. Whatever they were passing around for everybody to see.
In that world of militant republicanism, secrecy has always been the cornerstone of success. But it might be fair to say that there was a level of desperation among McKevitt and his followers that they were willing to clutch at any promising straw that might help them to achieve their objectives. There was a degree of hubris with McKevitt that made him cast aside all what might be his cautious instincts and go for the promise of what Rupert had to offer.
On that trip, Rupert also delivered what the real IRA bomb team had asked for: encryption software.
I gave it to the Brits, and the Brits gave it back to me. So I don't know what they did to it, if they did anything to it. And I had to keep that in my head because I didn't want to act funny,
The meeting became his closest shave.
So McKevitt's sitting next to me on the couch or whatever. So it starts out, and I says, I got your PGB software. And he took it, and he says, how do I know this is not, been messed with? And the adrenaline just run down, my throat, I didn't know what to say. I think he threw it back at me like that or something. And I says, hey, and I threw it back at him. I said, if you don't want the fucking stuff, throw it away. I says, your last man asked me to get it. I got it, not my problem. McKevitt kind of straightens up on the couch like that. He said, yeah, you should have told him that. He said, fuck him. That he would have the audacity to say that to you after you went and got it. And so, it was like, what do you do? I mean, it was all spur of the moment. And if it didn't go well, you were done.
Some game to be playing.
Yeah, but pretty exciting.
The rules of the game precluded him from materially helping the real IRA, but on one occasion he says that rule was inadvertently broken.
Did you ever hand over material to the real IRA that could have been used in attacks?
Only by accident once that I know of. And that was these daytimers that FBI and MI5 were, beside themselves over that. From the FBI's directive, we could supply nothing, and again, it might have been MI5s too, but we could supply nothing of material use to the Republican organization. We could only supply them with money that they had raised. In other words, there was no money added into it.
In June 2000, McKevitt delivered on his ambition to bomb London, targeting Hammersmith Bridge.
The small high-explosive device was attached to one of the bridge's girders.
Such was the concern, MI5 met Rupert in Paris that June, telling him a priority was to flush out McKevitt's London bomb cell. When Rupert flew to Dublin a couple of days later, he attended another real IRA Army Council meeting where it was clear McKevitt was in charge.
They would have showed him a lot of reverence, that he was the boss. And, just like you would any boss in this situation sitting around a conference table. You're sitting around a living room, but it all amounted to the same thing. And, they would look to him for yes, no, what do you think?
David Rupert was not only a spy in Ireland. In the US, he focused his efforts on FBI operations against the real IRA. But in November 2000, he was back in Ireland with Maureen. The couple went for dinner in a restaurant with Michael and Bernadette, their first and last supper all together.
The dining room's empty, just Mickey and me and Bernadette and Maureen. So he had enough sway at the place to empty the dining room.
Me and Bernadette were talking about, you don't talk about terrorist stuff, but she did talk to me about how appalled she was and how upset she was, how her children were treated after the U.Y.M bomb, how her children were treated at school, and that she was just appalled by that. And I sympathized with her and empathized with her and, apologized to her like I was really in it to win it, like I was doing my job.
Michael McKevitt was having a meal out with a man about to betray his trust.
So we had dinner and just talked about, life in general.
It was the last time they would ever speak. Why, when things were seemingly going so well, did they have to end?
Because of the change. It was the end of the Clinton administration coming into the Bush administration, and they spent millions of dollars on this operation. And in the US, the FBI is a policing organization, so they wanted to turn it into prosecution.
Months later, in a top-secret meeting in Dublin, he made a detailed statement to the Gardaí, who were building a case to prosecute. David Rupert's spy masters seemingly had different priorities. The FBI is primarily an evidence-gathering organisation versus the security service MI5, whose focus is on intelligence gathering. And according to Rupert, MI5 wanted to keep him inside the real IRA.
MI5 wanted to keep it going forever, and the FBI won. It was more important to MI5 to have a thumb on the pulse. If they got an investigation that's working, let it go, than it is to go arrest a couple people and prosecute them. The MI5 didn't want them arrested.
We put this to the security service MI5, but they did not respond. The London car bombs McKevitt had once boasted about materialised in March 2001 and included a bomb in a taxi at the entrance of BBC Television Centre. But Michael McKevitt's world was about to get smaller. His day of reckoning came on March 29th, 2001, when Gardaí knocked on his door.
It was as if he had been expecting this. He was quite relaxed, actually, in his home when we went in that morning. His comments was, when he sat into the car with us, was, there wasn't a lot of conversation initially, and then he turned on his comments where, this is a done deal. And when he was asked what he meant by this, he said, the Irish government are going to lock me up. And even though he was reassured that this was a legal process, his belief was that there was a determination to lock him up because of who he was and because of his name. And my impression was that we had gone from hero to villain and from a very high point in his life to the victim.
Michael McKevitt was brought to the non-jury Special Criminal Court about an hour ago.
In Dublin's Special Criminal Court, Michael McKevitt was later charged with directing terrorism and membership of an unlawful organisation. For several months, the Ruperts insisted that they did not wish to give evidence in court. Until they said an U.Y.M bomb documentary changed their minds.
I know I was in tears. I don't know who spoke at first, but we both knew we had to testify.
Michael McKevitt's prosecution would succeed or fail on the evidence of David Rupert.
When it emerged that David Rupert had made a statement against Michael McKevitt and actually was going to testify against him, I was surprised, but I was also curious about who else the authorities had left in the organisation, because informants are never lone figures, and the British Security Service never surrender or volunteer someone like that and blow their cover without ensuring that they have other assets in place to monitor the organisation and provide them with intelligence on it.
Rupert was flown to the UK before getting the royal treatment en route to Ireland.
We flew out of Chicago on one of the government Gulfstream 5s, which is a nice ride, and flew into a U.S. Air Force base in the middle of the UK. So when it come time to go to Ireland, we flew on, as it turns out, it was one of the Queen's planes. And the biggest seat in the plane was the Queen's seat, so that's where I sat.
For 15 days, David Rupert sat in a witness box, giving evidence in what became one of the longest cross-examinations in Irish legal history. Eyeballing him was the man he had fooled, Michael McKevitt.
I just looked at him and, you know, to me, at that time, I was able to change it in my head to he's a mass murderer. They've asked me every question they could, 7 ways. I said he's guilty of sin. Defense has one more question for you. And he says, you know, Michael McKevitt says that he's never met you. And I just said, that's foolishness. And that was the end of it.
Michael McKevitt was later convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. A landmark civil trial taken by some of the U.Y.M bomb families later found him and others liable for the atrocity. Michael McKevitt died in 2021. He went to his grave claiming he was wrongly blamed for the U.Y.M bomb, an atrocity that his dissident group, the real IRA, claimed responsibility for.
He will always be seen as the man that was responsible ultimately for the loss of 29 lives and 2 unborn children. And that is probably the legacy that will remain.
What happened in U.Y.M reverberates today, because one question consumes many of the victims' families. Could the bomb have been prevented had intelligence information been acted upon? That question will be the focus of an independent statutory inquiry which David Rupert says he will give evidence to if required.
I would have no problem in testifying.
Had you heard anything
Nothing.
about OMA before it occurred?
Nothing. Nothing from... I wasn't involved with the real IRA at the time, but nothing, not that OMA would be a target.
An email he sent 4 months before OMA was described by a High Court judge in Belfast as speculation about a group far removed from those who carried out the bombing, adding that Rupert's intelligence would not have prevented the OMA bomb. As part of a statement to Spotlight, Bernadette Sands-McKevitt said that David Rupert, a paid informant, is being utilised to do MI5's bidding. She said she refuted any and all allegations made by him. She pointed out that Rupert described himself as a mercenary, adding it was her husband's case that he was framed by MI5 with the assistance of the FBI and Gardaí. The Ruperts say they were paid close to $6 million for their work on behalf of the FBI and MI5.
Your husband, Maureen, has been described as a money grabber, as a failed businessman, as a liar by some people.
He likes money. He would do anything legally for money. He would not do anything illegal. As far as this whole operation, he never lied, he never fabricated.
In the near 3 decades since David Rupert was recruited by the FBI, the couple have lived with the fact that they will forever be looking over their shoulder.
What was it like when everything stopped and you could be yourselves?
It was horrible for me. It was because it was like, you know, all of a sudden, all this excitement, and then there was nothing.
We have different answers because I was very much relieved because we could tell our story to our family who we've been hiding from.
Looking back now, would you do it again?
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
It'd
change our lives forever.
Well, that's true, but I mean...
to this day.
My mother told me to go out and make noise in life. And maybe her idea of noise and mine were different, but I did.
Do you think Michael McKevitt ever thought of you in the years after he was put in prison?
Oh, I'm sure he thought of me, and probably, you know, would have liked to have had me tied to a chair and cutting pieces of me off one at a time. One person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. Depends on what side you're on. But at the end of the day, it's wrong to kill people.
What were you, David?
I was just doing a job. And doing a job that I viewed as doing for good to stop them from killing people.
The threat from dissident Republicans has not gone away. But in all of the years of the Troubles and peace thereafter, David Rupert did what few spies have ever done. He faced down an Irish Republican godfather in court. And at a crucial point in the peace process, David Rupert is credited as having done the British and Irish state some service.